America First. Sarah Churchwell. When Donald Trump revived the phrase America First as a campaign slogan in 2016, it was widely defended as a reasonable foreign policy doctrine espousing pragmatic nationalism and economic protectionism. Insisting that the motto had shrugged off its earlier history of interwar isolationism and associations with anti-Semitic fascist sympathizing, Trump's supporters claimed that a retooled 21st century America First would prove a unifying force to heal the nation's divisions. America First is not a threat, but a promise, Michael Barone pronounced after Trump's inauguration in the conservative Washington Examiner. The phrase America First in an inaugural address in, say, 1949 or 1953 would have been disturbing for many for understandable reasons. But it doesn't have any resonance for today's voters. A healthy nationalism based on America First points toward a less polarized, more inclusive country. Another conservative, Michael Anton, famed for a 2016 essay comparing Trump voters to the passengers on Flight 93 who saved America from terrorists, later agreed, declaring that America First is almost tautologically unobjectionable. After all, what else is the purpose of any country's foreign policy except to put its own interest, the interest of its citizens, first? America First was, they insisted, a forthright statement of pragmatic realpolitik, a direct expression of growing isolationism and protectionist sentiment among the American populace. These defenses were prompted partly by the fact that Trump's critics had not actually forgotten the slogan's disturbing resonances, detecting in America First an enduring ethno-nationalist dog whistle. Nativism is afoot in our politics once again, as one observer put it, explaining that nativism's core message is simple: America First. America belongs to those who consider themselves here first. The idea that some citizens have political or moral priority over others by virtue of historical priority is intrinsic to nativism, weighing the entitlements of those who were supposedly here first above those of more recent immigrants, while also ignoring the claims of other groups who demonstrably arrived before these supposedly real Americans, including indigenous people. America First has never been, and was never intended to be, a simple statement of patriotic self-interest, and it has certainly never worked as a unifying national motto. On the contrary, it has consistently served as a divisive code camouflaged by its ostensible harmlessness, a frequently conspiratorial cover story for internal power struggles. The history of America First, unlike the myths about it, reveals a story less about isolationism abroad than bigotry at home. There are reasons why 4 years after Michael Barone promised that America First would make the nation less polarized, insurrectionists carrying America First flags stormed the nation's capital, threatening to kill lawmakers. Reasons that the long history of the phrase makes clear. Political myths are never far from conspiratorial thinking. The idea that Barack Obama was not born in the United States is both a conspiracy theory and a myth, one promulgated in the name of putting America first, defining real Americans as a threatened minority forced to protect their interests against the menace of infiltration. Throughout its history, America First has been deeply entangled with exactly this type of mythic conspiratorial thinking. From the anti-Catholic conspiracies of the 1850s and anti-British free trade conspiracies of the 1880s and 1890s, through anti-Semitic conspiracies that bridged the 1920s and 2020s, and up to the Islamophobic and QAnon conspiracies of today. America First works as a shield precisely because it imputes innocence to its adherents, maintaining a mythic image of the nation and their privileged place within it that is at odds with historical reality. America First is a much older slogan than any of the debates over 21st century uses of it have recognized. Most responses to Trump's resuscitation of the phrase located its origins in either the America First Committee, AFC, of 1940 and 1941, or the Second Klan of the 1920s, while a bare handful noted that the phrase was popularized by Woodrow Wilson in 1915. But the expression goes back much further, to the first nativist movement in the United States, when the American Party, nicknamed the Know-Nothings, emerged during the 1850s to defend what they considered the real American culture of Protestantism from the threat of immigrant Catholicism. It is from these original debates over nativism and immigration restriction that the motto appears to have emerged, and it has continued as it began, articulating hostility against those its users deem insufficiently American. At an American Convention in 1855, as nativists adopted a platform to restrict or repeal naturalization laws and prohibit anyone but native-born citizens from holding political or legal office, a New York politician gave a speech proclaiming himself for America First, Last and Always, thus establishing what is, to date, the earliest recorded use of America First as a political slogan. You have the true spirit of Americans in your hearts. I know it is unpleasant both for speakers and hearers to be standing here in this drenching rain, but for one, American as I am, I decidedly prefer this rain to the reign of Roman Catholicism in this country. Cheers. I, as an American citizen, prefer this reign or any other reign to the reign of foreignism. Renewed cheers. I go for America First, Last and Always. America First's fundamental opposition to all forms of foreignism has never substantially altered, but what counts as foreignism has. As ideas of American identity continue to evolve, so America First must continually produce new enemies against which to define its own supposed pure vision of America. In the second half of the 19th century, many Americans saw in Catholicism a plot to undermine American democracy, and used America First, Last and Always, to rhetorically defend against the foreignism of popery. The Depression of 1893 was widely supposed to have been plotted by an international Catholic cabal, while the myth of a Catholic crusade of heretic extermination and infanticide persisted well into the 20th century. An enduring suspicion also held that the British Empire was trying to reclaim its lost colonies, and the two myths were by no means mutually exclusive. Thus, for example, after denouncing the nefarious designs of Catholics in the United States, an 1876 editorial titled Romanism in America urged every American in this centennial year to renew the Declaration of Independence, to declare himself and the nation free, as it ought to be, from the thraldom of every foreign power, whether England or Rome, and to begin again where our forefathers began, with America First, Last and Always. In practice, as this example shows, declarations of America First patriotism were consistently prompted by conspiratorial fears of foreign plots. This hostility against every foreign power abroad found expression at home as hostility against foreigners, making Catholics the target of mob violence in America through the second half of the 19th century. America First, and the world afterwards, had become a Republican motto and a presidential campaign slogan by 1888, as candidates promised to protect America's industrial patriotism against domination by foreign interests. When William Jennings Bryan's populist 1896 campaign attacked the gold standard as the mainstay of international finance, his supporters cheered that Bryan stood for America First, the world afterwards, whereas William McKinley was maintaining England's grip on this country by secret means. International cabals would remain the target of America First agitation. The only thing that changed was which foreign group was accused of pulling the strings. In the early decades of the 20th century, an enormously popular domestic tourism campaign called See America First helped transform the phrase from a Republican slogan rejecting free trade, itself suspected of being a British plot, to a more generally jingoistic expression. When President Woodrow Wilson adopted the phrase in 1915 to intervene in debates about the loyalty of hyphenate Americans, immigrant Americans who had recently naturalized, it thus fell on the fertile ground created by a decade of advertising. Hyphenates were accused of a dual loyalty that made them less than pure American. As hysteria against hyphenates mounted, Wilson joined in, declaring that it was necessary to demand of immigrant Americans, "Is it America first, or is it not?" In an editorial titled Hazing the Hyphenates, the New York Times endorsed the president's suggestion of humor when he told the nation's citizens to harass those who have failed in their loyalty, ending on a note of explicit menace. There is no alternative if they are to continue to live among us, to do business in the United States, to retain their citizenship. Life is hardly worth living under continual hazing. One senator criticized anyone who supported aliens when they should be for America first, last and all the time. Another announced that the next big national issue will be America for pure Americans, an issue defined by President Wilson in 2 words, America First. The problem, then as now, is how to measure the purity of Americans. After Wilson's speech, the slogan began to reverberate through American politics. As if the cry America First had rung through the halls of both houses, it gained bipartisan appeal. America First unites factions, in response to a putatively authentic German plot. The phrase became not only Wilson's re-election slogan and the 1916 Democratic National Convention's keynote, but also the slogan of his Republican opponent, Charles Evan Hughes, America First and America Efficient, who gave speeches promising undiluted Americanism, with America First, last and always, and no hyphens. When Theodore Roosevelt was asked to consider a third-party candidacy in 1916, his remarks were printed under front-page headlines announcing, "Bars the hyphen, America First. Don't be for me unless you are prepared to say that every citizen of this country has to be pro-United States, first, last, and all the time. Every American citizen must be for America first and for no other country, even second, and he hasn't any right to be in the United States at all if he has any divided loyalty." American neutrality during World War I was in part a reaction to the mutual suspicion with which both the British and German empires were held by much of the American populace. The president was right in his statement that it is America first, declared the Washington Post in 1915, endorsing neutrality. The United States is not to be swerved from this absolutely correct position by either servile adulators of British forms and customs or by enthusiastic admirers of German militarism and its practices. It is America first with the true patriots of the United States. At the same time, the internationalist Wilson was frequently accused of being avowedly pro-British, prompting editorials urging Republicans to oppose him by going America first, one better, and promising pure Americanism against the universe. Joining the spirit of escalation, a former Indiana senator caught the country's attention by declaring the nation's motto should be not America first, but America only, as politicians jostled to establish who was the most American against the universe. While agitating to keep the United States out of the conflict, William Randolph Hearst declared America First the motto of his flagship San Francisco Examiner, invoking Washington's axiomatic and semi-mythical warning against entangling alliances to support it. In 2 words, George Washington's farewell address consisted of the San Francisco Examiner's motto, America First. The supposed threat of entangling alliances abroad rapidly became a shibboleth, another iteration of conspiratorial fears about international cabals. It bespoke the growing isolationism of Americans who were weary of foreign wars and resentful of cheap immigrant labor, driving down domestic wages. They also feared that international elites were working to weaken American democracy and thus their own grip on the levers of power. When the United States finally entered World War I, America First effortlessly evolved into a patriotic wartime slogan. It continued to express a vicious anti-German animus, as well as violence against both foreign nationals and labor activists. Reports of Wobblies having been tarred and feathered ran alongside an illustration of the Statue of Liberty declaring America First, as newspaper editorials defended citizens who were expressing their feelings against suspected spies and seditionists in tar and feather parties and lynching bees, under banners proclaiming the United States of America first, last, and all the time. Newly naturalized Americans tried to protect themselves by waving America First banners and taking out ads in local papers to declare their loyalty. Peter Dorzuck, an Austrian shoemaker, is for America First, last and all the time. He was sent back from Camp Lee because of physical disability. The Paris Peace Conference did nothing to allay suspicions of international conspiracies to undermine the United States. The proposal for the League of Nations included the power to arbitrate international free trade, still a trigger for America Firsters, while the Treaty of Versailles, Article 10, committed the United States to ongoing European intervention. The eventual proposal for a world court promised to add internationalist insult to isolationist injury. These entangling alliances earned not only Hearst's formidable opposition, but also that of Republican leaders, including Henry Cabot Lodge. Together, Lodge and Hearst made America First the slogan for their implacable and victorious battle against Wilson's post-war settlement. As the fight against the League of Nations was culminating in early 1920, Hearst ran full-page editorials calling it a conspiracy to surrender our country to the thieving diplomacy of Europe, urging readers to stand up against this conspiracy of the International Plunderbund, a pro-German cabal representing the International Banking Trust. To fight it, Americans were urged to pressure their representatives to take up our good old watchword, America First. As one international conspiracy subsided, another rose to take its place. Anti-Catholic and anti-British conspiracies were quickly superseded in the early decades of the 20th century by fears of new waves of immigrants from Eastern Europe and the Far East. Suddenly, the cabal seeking to undermine American society looked like the Jews, Russians, and Asians who were arriving in American cities. The Red Scare charged the international Jew, accused of financing and engineering the Bolshevik Revolution, with a secret plan to replicate it in the United States. Once again, America First was raised as a rallying cry as groups like the American Defense Society sprang up to combat the supposed Jewish communist plot and stifle red flagism and uphold Americanism for America First. The Red Scare helped fertilize the anti-Semitic conspiracies that flowered in the United States in the early 1920s, in large part thanks to Henry Ford's circulation of the fraudulent Protocols of the Elders of Zion in his The International Jew. Reports of the Palmer raids deporting supposed Bolshevik organizers, 300 more Reds nabbed, arrived in American homes beneath Hearst's America First masthead, as did hysterical warnings of an impending yellow peril, the conspiracy theory that the Japanese and Chinese would unite the yellow races to invade and overpower white civilizations like the United States. When Warren G. Harding campaigned for the presidency in 1920 on an America First platform of isolationist protectionism, he used the slogan to answer every question, including the Japanese question. Americans on the West Coast are troubled in their minds about the Oriental question. That question raises every interpretation of our watchword, America First. There is abundant evidence of the dangers which lurk in racial differences. Meanwhile, Harding's supporters declared that his opponent supported the elite international bankers behind the League of Nations. Democrats, they charged, did not favor American interest. Their motto is not America First, because international banking is not conducive to Simon Pure American viewpoint. The Republican Party promised to uphold America First against international bankers, who were moneylenders first and not Americans at all, at a time when Henry Ford was making national headlines and declaring the existence of a plot by the Jew moneylender to take over American business. At the same time, another nativist group was taking possession of the slogan as well. The Ku Klux Klan had declared itself reborn in 1915, and by 1919, a Klan leader in Texas was declaring, "I am for America first, last, and all the time," he said, and "we don't want any of the foreign element telling us what to do." The second Klan issued a pamphlet declaring its ABCs, which began America First, benevolence, clannishness. While the Kloran enshrined it, the Klan stands for America First, first in thought, first in affections, and first in the galaxy of nations. We stand for 100% American and for white supremacy, declared a Kliegel in 1921. We are not anti-Catholic, anti-Jewish, nor anti-alien. We are non-Catholic, non-Jewish, and non-alien. We are for America first, last, and all the time. He insisted, even as the Klan was lynching Catholics, Jews, and foreign nationals, and tarring and feathering other Americans who aroused its ire. In Illinois, a Klan minister told his congregation that the fiery cross, which is the emblem of the Ku Klux Klan, is the symbol of the Christian religion, and that this organization is for America first. An Indiana newspaper, where the Klan had its highest membership during the 1920s, maintained the Klan was protecting America from being overrun by a set of people from foreign countries, or having their children intermarry with those of other races than the Anglo-Saxon race. By the mid-1920s, as the Klan was spreading across the country, America First traveled with it. In 1923, a Klansman in Binghamton, New York, used the same formula. I stand for America first, last, and always. I am opposed to any organization which tries to bring in foreign and alien ideals. This country was founded on Christianity. This nativism was inextricable from the eugenicist scientific racism that upheld Jim Crow racism and said that putting America first meant protecting the mythical Anglo-Saxon purity of the United States, ending our policy of putting the alien and his interests first and America last. Americans were warned against the enemy within our gates. We must prevent the entry into this country of races which cannot be assimilated, whose children cannot intermarry with our own. We want America first. The series of restrictionist immigration measures that culminated in the 1924 Johnson-Reed Act were widely understood in terms of America first. Hearst trumpeted the legislation's earliest versions under his America First masthead, and everyone knew what the phrase meant in practice. A Republican congressman supporting Japanese exclusion cited the doctrine of America First for Americans. When a Polish-language newspaper in Milwaukee denounced this most discriminatory piece of legislation, An Iowa editorial retorted that real Americans should learn to think of America first. It was clear to its critics at the time that the Johnson-Reed Act was politically proving the theory of the Ku Klux Klan, which sought to change the spirit of America from humanity first to America first and America for Americans. By the late 1920s, the association of America First with mythic foreign conspiracies abroad and demonstrable white nationalism at home had become indelible. William Big Bill Thompson ran for Chicago mayor in 1927 on an America First platform, absurdly charging the English monarchy with planting pro-British propaganda in the Chicago schools. Exploiting any xenophobic conspiracies he could find, including charges that international bankers are getting the upper hand, Thompson promised to keep it on the issues America First, no entangling alliances, no King George in the public schools. His opponent accused Thompson of dog whistling. America First was lifted from the Klan, he said, and they understand him very well. But Thompson's conspiracy-mongering worked, and soon he had started a successful string of America First clubs. As the Second Klan declined and European fascism rose in the early 1930s, America developed a host of its own proto-fascist paramilitary groups. One of the most notorious was a rabidly anti-Semitic outfit established in 1934 called America First, Inc. Aggravated by the seniority of prominent Jews in FDR's administration, paranoid fears of a Jewish communist plot long associated with America First finally found a powerful American target. Right-wing circles began calling Roosevelt Rosenfeld and his policy the Jew deal, while America First, Inc. regularly circulated reports that the Roosevelt administration was completely controlled by the international Jewish movement for world domination, urging America to definitely settle the Jewish problem by the simple elimination process. By 1936, a rising tide of nationalism was again discernible, thinking only of America first, last and always. As local politicians continued to campaign on America First against foreign entanglement platforms, another anti-Semitic group soon declared itself incorporated and, for America First, American Nationalist, Inc., were for America first, last, and always. The group promised to shoot it out with the communists on the streets when they try to take America over. The American Nationalists want to see the American people freed from the clutches of the gang of international bankers, shysters, and pawnbrokers. We do not want the United States of America to become known as the Western Dominion of the International House of Rothschild. By 1940, the far right in the United States was not unlike the constellation of groups orbiting there 80 years later, a miscellany of extremists clashing internally over fine doctrinal points, espousing various versions of nativist, racist, xenophobic, eugenicist, and Christian nationalist mythologies, but united in their resentment of a perceived racialized threat to economic opportunities and of a cultural pluralism that did not put their idea of America first. By the time the America First Committee, AFC, formed in 1940, the phrase had been in use for almost a century, and in political life had never uncoupled from nativist conspiratorial nationalism. Americans had grown up with the slogan's connotations, knowing that it signaled not only political isolationism, but also a Herrenvolk, anti-Semitic white nationalism that strongly resembled the European fascist against whom the AFC did not, for some reason, want to take arms. They knew that it frequently incited violence and always spelled intolerance. One early spokesman of the AFC was Henry Cabot Lodge, Jr., giving Defend America First speeches to make his father proud. Another was isolationist Senator Burton K. Wheeler, condemned as Hitler's megaphone when he argued that the Lend-Lease Bill would aid international bankers with their friends, the royal refugees, and with the Sassoons of the Orient and with the Rothschilds and the Warburgs of Europe. When war broke out in September 1939, Charles Lindbergh began delivering national radio broadcasts, rehearsing familiar eugenicist arguments for isolationism, invoking persistent hysteria about the old idea of the yellow peril, as he argued the United States need not intervene because there was no Genghis Khan or Xerxes marching against our Western nations. This is not a question of banding together to defend the white race against foreign invasion. Only if the United States were defending the white race would it be putting America first. Lindbergh joined the America First Committee in April 1941 as its official spokesman, his speeches routinely raising old nativist ghosts. They were praised by the Nazi press, which applauded Lindbergh under the headline America First as a real American of Swedish descent, who understood that the danger of invasion of the United States is not from Germany, but from the increasing British influence on the American continent. In September 1941, Lindbergh denounced the foreign elements he said were coercing America into joining an alien conflict. The three most important groups who have been pressing this country toward war are the British, the Jewish, and the Roosevelt administration. Suddenly, the dog whistle was audible, the outcry swift and peremptory. Even Hearst's papers condemned the un-American anti-Semitism of Lindbergh's address. 3 months later, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, deciding the question of intervention as America First subsided into rapid disrepute. The meaning of America First underwent an almost instant reversal from jingoism to sedition, as it suddenly denoted un-American fascist sympathies against the all-out Allied war effort. In 1944, Roosevelt's Justice Department prosecuted for sedition some of the more extreme right-wing groups that had been associated with America First, further discrediting the phrase. But its implications hadn't changed. The Reverend Gerald L.K. Smith, once Huey Long's deputy and America's most notorious anti-Semite, built a political career out of loudly attacking the international bankers who were our constant rulers. Smith founded the America First Party in 1943, promising to address the nation's Jewish problem in his 1944 presidential run. 2 years later, Smith was still promoting his America First crusade and distributing copies of Henry Ford's International Jew. Then Smith tried rebranding. The America First Party is trying to turn over a new leaf by changing its name to the Christian Nationalist Party. Before long, America First was being recuperated. During the Cold War's Second Red Scare, conservatives were urged to stand for America First against the flaccid forces of political liberalism that would sacrifice our national sovereignty and free world leadership for a system of international federalism potentially favorable to only the communist conspiracy. John F. Kennedy faced a primary opponent in 1960 who campaigned in an Uncle Sam suit on an America First platform. Barry Goldwater was regularly characterized as a candidate who would take the country back to a policy of America First. Voters wrote to their local papers declaring that, "I'm for Goldwater, let's again teach an America First doctrine," and "Senator Goldwater has long been an America First statesman. He will have our country and its interests first. The United Nations will not dictate to us." Goldwater would find no quarrel with Harding's America First program from 1920, noted a journalist with a longer memory than most, quoting Harding's 6 campaign promises: to stabilize America First, to safeguard America First, to prosper America First, to think of America First, to exalt America First, to live for and revere America First. The Republican conventions of 1920 and 1964, he observed, bore strong similarities. The names and the dates may change, but the plot remains the same. White supremacism remained intrinsic to that plot. George Wallace was described by his supporters in 1968 as offering strong leadership for the United States of America, first, last, and all the time, demonstrating the endurance of the phrase's implications in right-wing circles. David Duke, America's most notorious Klansman in the second half of the 20th century, has been associated with America First since at least 1976. A new image Ku Klux Klan is still bent on riding its white supremacy anti-Semitic America First stance to glory. 15 years later, Pat Buchanan ran for president espousing America First, neo-isolationism, to appeal to insular, inward-looking voters. Buchanan surprised the conservative establishment in 1991 by announcing his presidential candidacy on an America First platform to defend against the economic dangers presented by the rise of a European superstate. Buchanan's paleoconservative arguments were straight from the 1920s. He claimed that his political opponents would put America's wealth and power at the service of some vague new world order, whereas we will put America first. His isolationism was out of touch with an age of accelerating globalization, but America First still stoked conspiratorial myths of international elites to rouse populist sentiment at home. After Buchanan announced a Reform Party for the 2000 election with an America First platform, Donald Trump, a bankrupt Playboy billionaire, unexpectedly entered the lists. Because the Republicans are just too crazy right, Trump said he'd decided to challenge Buchanan, a Hitler lover and anti-Semite, who was going after the really staunch right wacko vote for the nomination of his own party. The following year, Trump withdrew from the Reform Party, announcing that the Reform Party now includes a Klansman, Mr. Duke, a neo-Nazi, Mr. Buchanan, and a communist, Ms. Lenora Fulani. This is not company I wish to keep. A few days later, Trump repeated the rejection. Well, you've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party. But then in 2016, Trump announced his own presidential candidacy on a platform of America First, and he stopped repudiating the really staunch right wacko vote. David Duke quickly endorsed Trump, saying he was overjoyed to see Donald Trump and most Americans embrace most of the issues that I've championed for years. My slogan remains America First. That summer, Duke announced his own Senate run on America First. Challenged to disavow the support of America's most notorious Klansman, Trump prevaricated before claiming under pressure, I don't know anything about David Duke, okay? I don't know anything about what you're even talking about with white supremacy or white supremacists. On November 9, 2016, Trump became the fourth president in a century to run successfully on a slogan of America First and the first to openly court fascism. On the day Trump was inaugurated, promising, "It's going to be only America First, Duke gave an inaugural talk on the neo-Nazi platform Stormfront.com titled White Revolution and America First, declaring the first day of Trump's presidency the official first day of the White Revolution. Trump had launched his presidential campaign by promising to build a wall to keep out Mexicans, whom he described as mostly rapists, and repeatedly attacked Muslim Americans. His first legislative act was a ban on travelers from 7 Muslim-majority countries. After Trump's protracted loss in 2020, Republican members of Congress, Matt Gaetz of Florida and Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia, attempted to maintain the momentum of his ethno-nationalist America First movement. America First isn't going away. "We're going on tour," Gates declared in May 2021 as he and Green announced the formation of the America First Caucus, to which they gave the familiar initialism AFC. Their partner in this venture was Congressman Paul Gosar, who had joined forces in the summer of 2020 with Nicholas Fuentes, a Christian nationalist and Holocaust denier who has hosted an America First program on various online platforms since 2017, where he sells AF merchandise and promotes white supremacism. The platforms endorsed by the Trumpist AFC include a restrictionist, assimilationist, and nativist approach to immigration. America is a nation with a border and a culture strengthened by a common respect for uniquely Anglo-Saxon political traditions. History has shown that societal trust and political unity are threatened when foreign citizens are imported en masse into a country, particularly without institutional support for assimilation. We cannot ignore the impact that mass immigration has on reducing job opportunities and depreciating wages for Americans. The implications of the uniquely Anglo-Saxon political traditions endorsed by the America First Caucus were not lost on observers who were quick to denounce its racism. Immigrants out, Anglo-Saxons in, without always noting that its version of white nationalist history was not only dangerously racist, but dangerously mythical as well. Green had already gained notoriety for her advocacy of any number of wild conspiracy theories, especially her support of QAnon, which claimed that Democrat leaders, Jewish financiers, wealthy philanthropists, and well-known liberal celebrities were members of a satanic cult of sex trafficking, blood-drinking pedophiles who control world governments. Only Donald Trump could overthrow them with his secret plan, sometimes called the Great Awakening, sometimes the Storm, as evangelical millenarianism fused with Nazi rhetoric. Availing itself of an array of stock conspiratorial tropes, QAnon's cabal of satanic global elites was recognizably the heir of all the conspiracies that used America First to defend against anti-Catholic plots of heretic mutilation, or anti-Semitic vampiric blood libels, or red-baiting Jewish communist plots, or Jewish international bankers. Today, instead of the Rothschilds controlling American finance, conspirators claim it is the Jewish financier and philanthropist George Soros, whom QAnon supporters like Green accuse of having sent Jewish people to die in the Holocaust when Soros was a teenager in Hungary. Insurrectionists who stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021, included not only Women for America First, but also standard-bearers waving the AF flags of Nicholas Fuentes, who is partly of Italian and Hispanic descent and identifies as Catholic. A century earlier, Fuentes might well have been the target of rage and violence perpetrated in the name of America First rather than its instigator. America First promulgates a myth of American homogeneity that the heritage and politics of people like Nicholas Fuentes disprove. The reality is that America has always been a fluid, heterogeneous collective that expands and evolves. Any effort to define America in static racial or ethnic terms was defeated before it began. That ship had sailed long before 1855. Today, it is an exercise in futility, which is precisely what makes it so dangerous, as people like Fuentes and his supporters endorse violence to bring about a fantasy version of pure Americanism that has never existed and can never exist. In a long essay that detailed the presence of America Firsters at the January 2021 insurrection, The New Yorker reported that Fuentes distilled America Firstisms into concise terms for his followers when he gave a speech declaring, "It is the American people and our leader Donald Trump against everybody else in this country and this world. Pure Americanism hasn't defeated the universe yet, but because America First keeps trying, its list of enemies only grows. The names and dates may change, but the plot remains the same."